So I am Stacy Nesbitt from Management Research Group. I am really excited to introduce you to Maria Brown. She's going to be doing your webinar today. But before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording today's session. As a follow-up, you'll get access to the recording, access to the slides, and any Q&A that we don't get to live during the session today. So please use that the question option to type any questions you have during the webinar into the box. We'll get to them along the way and at the end if we can. Marie's got a lot to cover and we want to make sure you get to hear all the cool things she has to say. But please throw those questions in. So off to introduce you to Maria. Maria is the head of research and education here at MRG. She also works as an executive coach with many of our customers. She's a board certified coach and she has her PhD in developmental psychology. So she's like part nerd, part life guide, leadership guide, development guide.
I
She's
love
been
it.
published in TD Magazine, Coaching Perspectives, and Developmental Science. She's known around here for sort of making good sense of these psychological assessments that we have that we offer into and turning that into really practical tools for coaches to use. So today she's going to unpack a little bit about why context and motivation and understanding those things might be the secret sauce to effective coaching. All right, Maria, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stacy. I love that. I like being seen as a little bit of a nerd and, that still communicates well with people about
Yes,
the things that
yes.
I'm interested in.
Always.
So welcome, everyone, and thank you for spending some time with us today. So I am here to talk about the importance of bringing context and motivation into the coaching engagement and how the right assessments can really help you be more adaptable as you bring in different aspects of clients' context into the coaching engagement. So let me tell you a little bit about MRG Assessments. So we are a Portland, Maine-based organization, and we've been around for over 40 years at this point. During this time, we've offered assessments that are especially designed to foster deep self-awareness, as I will share a little bit with you today. We offer solutions for leadership, motivation, personal development, and sales. And as you can see, we have a global presence where, in a lot of different countries, the assessments are available in different languages. And what that means from, the research side of me and also the coach and consultant who uses those insights, it means we have a lot of assessment data from a broad range of leaders and professionals. And that gives us the opportunity to share insights around leadership, motivation, coaching, and assessment with you, like we're doing today. So let's get started. The title of today's webinar is From Insight to Impact, Coaching with Context and Motivation. And that title, Insight to Impact, has a double meaning, really, because it's about deepening your impact and effectiveness as a coach, but also about how you can help your clients deepen their impact and their effectiveness at work, as leaders, or wherever it is that they are setting goals, by providing them and you with the right information to inform developmental decisions, and hopefully to make those decisions and those changes stick. So there are four areas that I am going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about context and why it matters, offer you some concrete evidence that it matters. I will describe what motivation is in our context and why that matters. We'll talk about how context and motivation can be used in combination, and I'll give you a real example from coaching. And then I'll spend some time talking about how to bring motivation into the coaching conversation. So before we get started, though, I would like to invite you to share a little bit about your feelings around what can be challenging in coaching. So, and Stacy will launch. Oh, do we see it? Stacy launched the poll. So, which of these do you find most challenging in coaching? Pinpointing what the client actually needs to work on, anticipating roadblocks before they show up, getting clients to follow through consistently, or helping clients build real self-awareness. Let's see.
We're doing
Oh,
okay.
follow through
Good.
is showing up.
Yeah, 62% have responded. Good. We like to get up to at least 80% participation in the
Yeah, I can't reveal.
polls.
Yeah, I forgot. I started revealing the results. I'm going to be
That's okay.
quiet. Ah,
There we go. We got over 80%. So I will share the results.
there we go. Oh, wow. So top over here, we have getting clients to follow through consistently. That's follow. Oh, there's a tie for the
Mm.
second place, pinpointing what they clients need to work on and helping them build real self-awareness and anticipating roadblocks showed up 7%. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating, and Stacy for setting that up and making sure I didn't say too much before the reveal. So I will share with you, this is really this. It's informative for me to, guide what we're going to talk about. But the good news is what I will share with you today actually addresses each of these. So I think you're going to find something that helps you figure out how to avoid these issues in coaching in different points of the presentation. So let's get started. Okay, so let's start with context, right? So is there one recipe for success that we can apply to all of our clients? Of course not, right? Anyone who's coached more than one person knows that this is true. So why isn't there one? So suppose you're coaching a senior HR leader who's trying to be more effective at managing change, right? So you can start to think about the types of conversations, questions, things you're going to be addressing with this client. But then your next call is with a senior supply chain manager who is focusing on engaging his team more, right? Different set of questions come to mind, different path, different developmental plan eventually. So are you going to follow the same recipe for both? Would you imagine that they're going to decide on the same set of action steps or same plan? Of course not, right? And these are things that we know, but I would like to show you some real world concrete evidence that this is in fact true, and I'll show you to what degree it is true. So let's start by defining what I mean by context. Context is anything that affects the situation within which that client, that leader is working, right? So it could be things like organizational factors, their role, their particular responsibilities or goals. It could be personal factors like generation or gender, right? Anything that influences what the client is doing, what their goals are, and can get in the way of effective coaching or affect how they achieve effective coaching. Now, these are things that we typically identify through coaching and through the conversations that happen in that process. But the real, what I'm going to show you is it does influence what a leader needs to be doing in order to achieve their objectives. And the way that I'm going to show it is by looking at leadership behaviors. So, which behaviors are important for effective leadership? Well, it depends, right? It really depends. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to answer that with a study of 10,000 leaders from a global sample. And it's really recent data. So these are people who completed the leadership effectiveness analysis 360 between 2022 and 2026. So we're looking at the last five-ish years of the most recent 5 years. So the LEA, Leadership Effectiveness Analysis, measures 22 behaviors, leadership behaviors. These are concrete, specific, and observable, and they answer the question, how does this person act as they go about their work? And it's a 360 assessment, so that is measured from the self perspective as well as the observer perspective. Importantly, these are descriptive, they're not evaluative. It's really what is this person doing? Not saying whether it's good or bad, it's just really showing a picture. It also measures effectiveness from the perspective of observers. And this is subjective, this is evaluative, and it answers the question, how well do others think this person is doing as a leader? So when you have those two pieces of information about each of these leaders, you can combine that statistically to determine what the relationship is between behavior and effectiveness. And essentially, it gives us a list of behaviors that are predictive of effectiveness in different contexts or different situations. So I'll show you an example of that by leadership level. So let's look at two different but still pretty close levels. We've got president CEOs and senior VPs or directors. So next level down. What you can see here is the list of behaviors that are important for effectiveness for both types of leaders. Now, one thing that's going to stand out is there's a lot of similarity, right? They both need to, if they want to be seen as effective, they should consider being more strategic and, taking a broad, a future-focused approach to decisions and thinking about everyone and everything that's affected. They need to communicate clearly, for example. They should consider showing empathy and connection with others. However, CEOs, but not senior VPs, need to also ensure that they are seeking input from others before making decisions, right? That they're getting other people's perspectives. Senior VPs, on the other hand, don't. So that ability or that tendency to seek input is not a differentiator in terms of effectiveness, but showing up with a high level of energy and excitement is, as is showing less emphasis on being an autonomous decision maker, as shown by lower emphasis on self. So two levels, two different sets of behaviors for effectiveness. It comes out in function as well. So HR personnel leaders should consider showing up with a high level of energy and excitement if they want to be seen as more effective, whereas accounting and finance leaders should consider being more innovative, creative, perhaps being a little more comfortable with risk in order to be seen as more effective. If you look at this by goal, so what is the outcome that the leader is seeking? So leaders who are trying to be seen as more effective at delivering results have a different set of behaviors to consider than leaders who are trying to be seen as effective at conflict management, right? Because these are the behaviors that, if they emphasize more or less, are likely to lead to being seen as more effective in those areas. And so what we're seeing in these three examples is real evidence that context matters. Okay. And I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone here or most of you here, but it's kind of reassuring to see it play out, right? It's not just intuition, but we have real data that shows this. I will remind you that you're getting a copy of the slide deck, so you will be able to see the results at your own time and figure out what and pay attention to the details that are most interesting to you. I just, at this point, want to focus on the differences between the different types of leaders and the different contexts in which they are working. So a good assessment is going to allow you and your client the flexibility to use those contextual factors to make decisions about what they need to do and not use a more one-size-fits-all approach to effectiveness. Now, I'm going to talk about the importance of self-awareness around motivation. Okay. And I'll start by defining what I mean by motivation. But what you're going to see is two things. Motivations influence what people tend to do. And when people understand their motivation, they can make better decisions about what they need to shift and how they can go about making those changes so that they're sustainable, so that they're a little bit easier for them. So you'll see all of that in the coming slides. But let's start with that definition. What are we talking about in this case when we're talking about motivation? This is not about whether someone is motivated or not. What it really is, it's about identifying what drives or attracts a person and what drains or repels them. Okay. And for each motivator, people are going to fall somewhere in that range, from it really attracts and drives me to it drains or repels me. So I'm going to give you an example so that it makes a little more sense. When you're motivated by stability, which is one of the motivators that we measure, you're likely to look for and set yourself up for predictability, for consistency, right? So you may be someone who prefers to take a cautious approach. For example, you may not change jobs unless it's absolutely necessary, or you may be hesitant to accept a promotion, right? There's a level of comfort in what's known, even if it's not great. Now, someone who's on the other side of that and is less motivated by stability, uh, is probably going to become bored, even uncomfortable when things are too predictable and too stable. And they're going to be more likely to switch gears, as soon as things start feeling boring and monotonous, right? And that feeling of dread, oh my gosh, the same thing again, is probably going to happen pretty quickly if someone has very, very low motivation and high drain by stability. So what's one of the key things about motivation is that they're not always easy to identify. And I'm going to share why, but they're not easy to identify. But once we know what they are, once we gain that self-awareness, we have power and agency to make better decisions. To make better decisions about to understand what's going on in our lives and make better decisions about what needs to change so we can live with a higher level of emotional energy. So, what does someone's emotional profile tell them? It helps to answer these questions. Why do I behave the way I behave? Why do I think the way I think? Why do I feel the way I feel? And why do I make decisions the way that I make decisions? Now, motivation works best, or understanding of motivation works best when it's combined with coaching. And so when you're able to use those insights with your clients in a coaching context, you help them not just create awareness around those motivations, but you help them see how those motivations impact them as individuals and impact their work, and their life. So, four key things to understand about motivation. First, motivations are formed early and they evolve throughout our lives, right? Motivation is based on experience. And as soon as we start having experiences and forming memories of those experiences, we start developing our motivations. They can evolve as new experiences, emerge in our lives, as new things start to happen and our interpretation of those experiences start to shift, but the evolution tends to be slow. But they're formed throughout our lives and they're not static. Uh, it's interesting. We don't always recognize how strong or weak our motivations are, especially compared to other people. And especially when those are really strong motivators on either end, like really high or really low. Uh, and that is because it's truly difficult to have a fully objective view of ourselves because we normalize our motivations, right? We see them so much they're just not very salient, for us, and it's helpful to see them in relation, to others. So it's one thing for me to know that I'm not very motivated by stability. Like, I don't need it. I get bored easily when things are too predictable. But when I see a score that says I'm on the 10th percentile of that, like, wow, that's lower than almost anyone I know. If you're talking to people, from a normally distributed population, which is, who we usually interact with. And so there's a part of that self-awareness is in a way understanding the extremeness, right? How extreme those motivators can be. And if I'm really low on stability and I keep switching things on my team, I might be driving them crazy. I just never really thought about it that way, right? So it does inform some of that understanding of what's going on, at work and with the people I'm interacting with. Our motivations are not straightforward and they can conflict with one another. So, take, for example, the person who is highly motivated by stability, consistency, predictability. Let's say they're also motivated by innovation and creativity and novelty. How does that push and pull work out for them? Does understanding that help them understand inconsistent behavior or perhaps even hesitancy, right? Why does it take me so long to make these decisions? Oh, yeah, I'm being pulled into directions, internally, when it comes to my motivation. It can be really insightful in that way. And finally, motivation is not behavior. It's not always easy to see. So it's hard for us to see someone else's motivation. And even for people, it's sometimes hard to see because a lot of the times when we are introspecting and thinking about, who we are, we think about what we do, right? And motivation doesn't always translate into behavior. Motivation is an internal driver. And it doesn't always translate into behavior because we don't always have the opportunity to express those motivators. Let's say, for example, I'm someone who's very motivated to express myself emotionally, to express myself spontaneously, right? Let my emotions run loose. But I work at an organization that's a lot more muted, where that's frowned upon. Well, you're not going to see that behavior from me because I mean, I'm trying to kind of adapt to what's expected at this organization. And that can lead to frustration and other issues that can be uncovered through the coaching conversation around motivation. When it comes to coaching, motivation really helps with self-awareness. And I've said self-awareness many times, and I'll continue to talk about self-awareness, but it's true. It helps people go beyond what they are doing to why they are doing the things that they are doing. And it also provides clarity around biases we may not know we have. And it it helps people understand relationships a little better. Like, why is it easier for me to get along with this person, but a little more difficult to get along with that one? Why is there friction here, but it's kind of smooth sailing over here? When we understand our motivations, we can understand where those things might emerge. Uh, so think about the person who is very emotionally expressive and is motivated to kind of show their emotions spontaneously. Uh, they may think that's the way that everyone works, right? The way that everyone thinks. And when they encounter someone who's not very open with them, they might fear there's a hidden agenda or they're keeping something from them. On the other side, someone who's less spontaneously expressive, right? Because they're not motivated that way, may not realize they're not using emotional expression to their advantage, or they may not realize that others might think they're hiding something or keeping something from them, right? It helps to clarify a lot of what might be getting in the way of relationships. When it comes to coaching, motivation helps build rapport, and it helps you do that quickly and get to know your clients very quickly, because you can ask questions that are really about them and who they are deep down. It's not just some, I don't know, random question that, some stock question you ask everyone. It's a question that's specific to what motivates them. And then it's like, oh, how does this play out? Where has it gotten in your way? How does it help you? Like a lot more, you can get more specific around those things. It also gives you specific language to talk about these things and to revisit them throughout the engagement. It's once someone identifies what is very motivating or less motivating to them, they tend to remember it. They start seeing it more, and it'll come up again during the engagement. It helps identify achievable actions. And we like to think about it as you can identify low-hanging fruit. Like, these are the things that are going to be easier for me to do and more likely to sustain because they align with who I am, versus, oh, this is going to take a little more of a heavy lift. This is going to be harder, more planning, and more draining. And even if you have to do that, it's good to know that so that you can prepare for it so it doesn't become a roadblock as they're going through that developmental process. And it facilitates sustainable development, because when you align someone's motivation to their developmental plan, it makes it easier. There's less thought involved. You have to be less purposeful. It happens more naturally. It's easier to create habits around things that naturally align with who we are deep down. Okay, so I've covered a lot about these two things. So we've talked about context and why it matters. I've talked about what motivation is and how it can help with coaching, but I've kind of kept it abstract. So let me show you how this actually works in a real coaching context. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example, and as I present it, I just want to make sure that we all remember, and and I remind myself that the assessments used are not guiding the coaching, they inform the conversation, right? It just gives you a lot of additional information to guide your client as they make decisions about what they want to be doing. So here is Sarah. Sarah is the head of customer success in the professional services industry. And when she came to me, she was dealing with poor client retention caused by disengaged account managers, right? So the disengaged account managers part is where we started to talk about what was really going on, right? And through that discovery, it really became evident that she was really trying to focus on or trying to work on employee engagement. So she would say things like, I realize my metrics only move when my people feel valued. So I'm shifting my focus to leading a culture where people actually want to show up, right? So there's something about engagement there. So as part of the coaching, she completed 2 assessments, the leadership effectiveness analysis, which measures 22 leadership behaviors and over 30 leadership competencies. And she took the individual directions inventory, which measures 17 motivational dimensions. So here's where we started. So the first step to our engagement was looking at, well, the first step to the assessment part of the engagement was looking at her leadership impact report from the LEA 360. And one thing that stood out to her, well, to both of us, but focusing on her, was that her scores on promoting and enhancing employee engagement were not as high as she would like them to be, right? They're not super low, they're kind of in the middle. But given that she wants people to actually want to show up, this was a place where she felt she needed to move the needle. So that's great, right? We have a goal now. We have something that she can work on. But we wanted to look at the rest of the LEA, the Leadership Effectiveness Analysis Assessment, and we looked at her behavior profile. Now, remember, the full report includes 22 behaviors. I'm only showing you 2 here to keep things simple, but her excitement and empathy scores were lower. And so what this means is that she is not emphasizing the behavior of excitement, which has to do with engaging with a high level of energy and getting other people energized and excited very much. She's really not emphasizing it in her day to day. She's also not spending a lot of time on empathy or the behavior of building personal bonds with others and showing a genuine interest in their needs and their well-being. So, okay, we've got an idea of how she's showing up and how how she's seeing herself and how others are seeing her. No blind spots here, so, pretty straightforward. Then we looked at research that connects that goal that she has of employee engagement with the 22 behaviors. And what we found is that, in fact, empathy and excitement are both important for conveying effectiveness or being effective at promoting employee engagement. So you've got someone like Sarah. I mean, Sarah just said, hey, is this what I need to do? I'll work on these 2 things. I'll work on excitement and I'll work on empathy, right? Problem solved. Let's get to it. Well, here's the thing. We still have one more piece of information to look at, right? And we all know that the more people set out to do developmentally, the less likely they are to keep at it, right? To sustain that change. And so I wanted to explore motivationally what actually made more sense for her. So we looked at her IDI profile, and it turns out that Sarah has a lot of energy for entertaining, livening up situations, using her charisma, making people laugh, right? That's something that, that drives her, something that she does enjoy. Whereas she has a little less, so she's at the 30th percentile on giving, which has to do with gaining emotional satisfaction from providing support and comfort to others. So when you think about her behavior profile and her motivational profile together, what we're seeing is there's clearly low-hanging fruit here, right? Giving her entertaining score, excitement seems to be the path of least resistance, the low-hanging fruit, the thing that's going to be easier for her to start doing and potentially continue to do. I will say this was not about me telling her what to do. It's about presenting information so that she can decide what she wants to do. Let's say Sarah, wanted to work on empathy. We can still work on that. It's the heavier lift, but the coaching conversation would have been different, right? We would have had to address strategies for how she was going to manage that and be prepared for the energy drain that might follow. Really trying to work on empathy. One thing she could do is reframe it, right? Let's say, we would look for other motivators that might feed into that behavior of empathy without necessarily thinking of it as giving and providing support to others. One thing I will add before we move on is the example I'm giving you is looking at motivation and behavior to find the low-hanging fruit, the path of least resistance. But this could have also been used if even before she had a goal to increase employee engagement, she was curious, hey, why is my empathy so low? When we look at her motivational profile, we would say, well, you have a little less energy for this. You're a little less motivated by giving. So let's have a conversation about whether that's what's driving this lower emphasis on empathy. And if it is, and it's something you want to work on, then what other motivators, what other drivers might we want to focus on? Or how do you prepare yourself for that heavier lift that you're trying to accomplish? Okay, so I have been talking for a long time, I feel like. So I wonder if there are any questions.
There's one question, Maria. It's an interesting one from Marilyn. It says some leaders with ADHD are particularly affected by insufficient or variable motivation. Would you position the IDI as a good assessment to help them maybe what's the actual question here? Is this assessment useful and appropriate for leaders with ADHD or executive functioning deficit?
Oh, that's an interesting one. So it's definitely not an assessment you want to use in a clinical setting, but I know that's not the question that you're asking. I just feel like it's a good opportunity to share that because that's not the population within that we use to norm or validate it. However, because it's such a big population of leaders, there are people with various neurological differences in there. And so what I would say is any leader with, variable patterns and motivation, this would probably just give you, because the way the assessment works, it's looking at different situations and what stands out to that person. So it would give you the stronger motivators across different situations. And what might happen is if it varies a lot from context to context or situation to situation, then they might get a mid-range score on something, which would indicate to you as you're debriefing and helping them interpret it, that it's a situational motivator. But when something is really strong, it would show you that for this person, regardless of what's going on, this tends to be something that's consistently motivating to them. So I think I would address that with the individual during the debrief, right? Like
Yeah.
really get deep into how this plays out for them. But that's a really good question.
I'll just add that I would imagine it gives them new language and new, very sort of
Mhm.
not sort of subject. It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's more objective language rather than them being very critical about themselves because this is comes up for them a lot. This is a nice sort of neutral set of information about themselves to give them
Mhm.
a different way of talking about it with other people. That's what I would add.
Absolutely. That's a good point, right? It's a way, and I'll share more about why, how the profile is actually neutral, right? And non-judgmental. The results are non-judgmental because, yeah, it makes it easier to share those insights with
Yeah.
others because you're not sharing something truly personal or
Yeah.
negative about you.
There's one more question, but we'll get to it later. I want to give you a chance to finish because we've only got 10 minutes left.
All right. Thank you, Stacey.
Yeah.
And yes, we anything we don't get to today, we will I'll answer them and we will email those to you in the post webinar follow-up. So rest assured your questions will get answered. So please keep adding them or keep submitting them. Okay, so I've used assessments in the example that I just shared with you. And I want to share with you where I see the value in assessment. And it's really about self-awareness. I told you I was going to talk about self-awareness a lot, but it helps us see things that we can't see through conversation alone. And so as a self-awareness tool, assessments are instrumental. I mean, they're very important. Because self-awareness is tricky, right? People don't have a lot of time to reflect. I mean, they barely have time to go through, executive coaching, right? Much less to sit there and reflect for a few hours. And even if an assessment takes, let's say, 20 minutes to complete, that's a lot more efficient than sitting there and answering an open-ended question in your mind about, oh, who am I deep down? Like, those bigger questions. Um, there are things under the surface that cannot be explored objectively because we're still looking at it through the filters of our motivational profile, right? And what we've learned to normalize throughout our lives. There are things we don't know to explore, right? And that's honestly, that's where a good assessment that's well validated is going to really help surface things that you don't even know about, that you would not have thought about because they're just so normalized in the way you see them. We're also not good at understanding how other people see us. So, when you look at your motivation, you think about relationships, it helps to answer some of those questions. But also, we have this great research that we're happy to share with you. Let us know if you're interested in it on blind spots. And when we've looked at it in terms of behavior, about a third of the behaviors on average are blind spots for most leaders. So it's just difficult to see a lot of these things without the help of a tool like an assessment, which really just enhances and facilitates the practice of coaching. I am now going to share a little bit about the IDI, the Individual Directions Inventory that I've been talking about, and that is our assessment that measures 17 motivational dimensions. What I will share about it that I think is really special is that these 17 motivators are independent of one another, which means that any combination is possible in someone's profile. And so it really does give you a nuanced look at the individual. And you can see here a summary profile. So it's a profile minus the narrative that they would get. But those dots could be anywhere for each individual. This assessment measures motivation, not personality. It really is a picture in time. It does not assign people to a type or box them into a category. And that makes it easier to apply those insights across different contexts. It also, I feel, respects and reflects the diversity of humanity because we're not saying there are 10 types of people or 5 types of people or whatever. Like there's, I don't know, so many different types of people and you need an assessment that can capture that. Results are descriptive and not evaluative, so that makes it easier to accept. And as Stacey was bringing up, it's easier to share with others, right? You don't feel like, ooh, I need to keep this to myself. Dimensions are value neutral, has the same effect. And it does provide you as a coach and them specific language to discuss and understand their energy profile. And the IDI does this because in part it uses this unique questionnaire design that you can see on the screen. It forces people to make decisions about what is most like them and what is next like them as they're answering different items in the assessment. And even when they're selecting within those categories, they get to describe how much like them something is. So if something is very much like me, I'm going to give it a 5 instead of a 4. If it's the best one, but not the best descriptor of me, I'll give it a 4. And you can do the same thing with the one that's next. So it captures a lot of information in each item. And especially as you're measuring motivators across the assessment, you're capturing a lot of information. So it yields less biased answers because it's forcing people to really think about how they're answering. And they can't pick, 5s for everything, for example. It allows us to differentiate among individuals. So this is more motivating to me than it is to you. But also within my profile, this is more motivating to me than this other motivator is. So that's, a lot of richness in the information. Items are value neutral, as you can see. So when you choose something, is because it does something to you, not because it's objectively seen as the right answer for most people. And it measures motivators indirectly. So people really, as they're answering it, they're just thinking about situations and what they, what resonates with them as they're thinking about those situations. Not, oh, I want to be seen as someone who's high on giving, because I think that makes me look good. Now, when it comes to the coaching conversation, self-awareness, 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 I'll keep saying that. And it increases your knowledge of the person, as well as it helps build rapport from the coach's perspective. It's an opportunity for introspection and better decision making, but it's guided introspection, right? It's now that we've seen this, what does it mean? How does this play out in your life? It's an opportunity to recalibrate, like, oh my goodness, I never thought the score was, my motivator was so high. Okay, I need to really think about that, right? Like this is, what does this mean for my team if I'm really driven by this thing and they're probably not because I'm on a 99th percentile and that's as high as you can get, right? Or I'm, fifth percentile. What does that mean if everyone is more motivated by this, but I'm the one making decisions? Uh, it gives you the opportunity to revisit recent events and think about why they went the way they went. So it's recalibrating, right? Let me rethink about this. Let me rethink how this went on and what happened really. And then as new events happen, you start to see them in that light. And it's going to give you clear, concise, specific language that you will revisit over and over again in the engagement because it's such an efficient way to address motivation in the simplest, in the simplest way possible. So we have an opportunity for more questions. I think I saw a few things show up, but I haven't been paying attention to the questions, Stacey.
That's actually a good thing, Maria. So we've got 3 minutes left. There's only one question, so if anyone has more questions, please pop them in there. The question is it advisable to use the IDI independently of the LEA, or is it intended to be used only in conjunction with the LEA?
Ooh, great question. So the IDI is really great because it works well with all sorts of assessments. So, I mean, we use it with the LEA. Pretty much for any engagement that we're working on. We usually start with the IDI, build rapport, get to know the person, and then we go into the LEA. And remember, for those of you who are not familiar, the LEA is a leadership assessment that measures behavior and leadership effectiveness. So yeah, it works well with others, but we have clients who use them with other assessments, who use it with other assessments as well. And it's really the why, right? It really gets down to explaining the why. So you don't need to use it with the LEA. If there's a leadership assessment you're really, really in love with, then we're okay with that. You can use it with the IDI.
It can be used all on its own too. I mean, it is
And on its own,
available
that's right.
for just, career coaching or we have some nice reporting that's based on teams. So if you're working with a group of people and you want them to help them understand each other a little bit better, or they're a newly formed team, they can each take their own, and then there's really cool group coaching work you can do with them, or even just one-on-one if two people are like struggling to get along or find common ground and you're invested in them both, help them get to know each other better with very sort of neutral language and data, not opinions.
Yeah. And we have a career and motivation report that's really great if someone's in the middle of a career decision, right, or a career transition.
Yeah.
Really help them figure out whether it makes sense to them and how they can make that transition work better for them. And that, I mean, that can be a standalone assessment for that particular type of engagement. I would encourage you to, which kind of gets me to the next slide, talk to us. Are you wondering whether it makes sense to use it for a particular engagement? I love having those conversations. Those are the fun, creative ones, right? Like, how does this fit into to this engagement? So yeah, please reach out to us. The QR code here will get you to a contact form and one of us will be reaching out to have the
And
conversation.
we are offering a special for folks who attend this webinar. If you register by April 15th for any of our upcoming certifications between April and July, so there's an IDI certification on April 15th, and then we've got both LEA and IDIs through the next 4 to 5 months. But if you sign up before April 15th, we're offering a 25% discount. So fill out that form, talk to us. It'll most likely be me, Stacy, or my colleague Debbie, who will respond to you. And we look forward to seeing you guys at future webinars and future certifications if you're not certified in both assessments. And thank you so much, Maria. This was great, really informative.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And thank
everyone.
you, everyone.